Representative Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for several of you on the panel. I'll go through the same question, or I'll ask each of you to answer this. Do you know of any cases where state regulations are failing, thus creating the need for a blanket federal regulation? In other words, what gap is the Department of Interior trying to fill? Is there such a gap? Senator Olson?
Congressman Flores, I don't see any gap. I feel that the state of Montana, the Board of Oil and Gas Conservation, the Oil and Gas Division of DNRC are doing a fine job of regulating that industry in Montana.
Okay, Mr. Helms.
Congressman Flores, I meet on a quarterly basis with the other state regulators at Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission meetings, and we haven't identified any cases where states are failing. In fact, in North Dakota, when we adopted our rule in April of 2012, our wellbore failures went from 6 per year to 0. We've had 0 failures since our rules were put in place.
Okay. Mr. Lancey?
Thank you, Congressman. Things seem to be working well in Wyoming. I would like to also offer that by having the states be able to regulate locally what the regulation should look like, states are so much better equipped to respond quickly if there are changes, as new technologies evolve, as differences occur. At the state level, we can respond by making adjustments to local rules as opposed to trying to change a federal national rule.
Okay. Mr. Byron?
Congressman, I think New Mexico is doing a fine job of regulating, and from our standpoint on our federal acreage, the BLM is already has a key part of that as well. So I don't see any gaps whatsoever. It seems to me this proposed rule is a problem looking for a solution looking for a problem.
And Mr. Byron, I want to follow up on a comment that was made by Mr. Amos, and he said that we should look at these costs in terms of the impact on cost per MCF. And as a person that used to be in the oil and gas business, I always measured things on a cost per MCF basis. And every penny wound up being part of my economic decision as to whether to invest or not invest. And to the extent that uncertainty was added, I had to add a premium as well so that I could know that I could get a return on investment for our shareholders and produce energy for this country. So I'd ask you this, based on what you've seen of the proposed federal overlay from the DOI, does that extra cost expressed on a price per MCF or a price per well basis, either one, make it more likely or less likely that you're going to produce an environment where we're selling gas at $4 an MCF? Well, actually, I don't know this. What's the basis differential back to the San Juan? What are you getting for your gas?
Well, Congressman, finally, we are getting close to $4 an MCF.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that, but still, that's a historically low price. So does this help you or hurt you in your decision-making to invest in American energy?
Well, it definitely hurts, I think, from the standpoint, when you look at the San Juan Basin, we've got a lot of potential. All the companies have looked at their reserves. There's, as I mentioned before, there is potential, but right now we've only got about 4 or 5 rigs drilling in the basin, where when prices were higher, we were up over 40 rigs. So no question, when you start adding costs, it definitely has a big impact on the activity in the area. And as a result, the San Juan Basin is hurting right now.
Okay. And Senator Olson, I believe that it was you that said we have had 1.2 million hydraulic fracturing operations over the last 60 years. Did you say that, or was it one of the other?
Congressman, yes, in the U.S.
Okay. And I think this was already asked earlier, but I'm going to repeat it just because I think it's helpful to get the right perspective. 1.2 million hydraulic or HF operations in this country over 60 years, and both Lisa Jackson and Carol Browner have testified that there's been no subsurface water damage. So, again, does this indicate to any reasonable person that we should add a federal overlay when you said there's no gap to fill? And so I'd ask, I'll start with you, Mr. Byron.
None that I can see at all.
Okay. Mr. Lancey?
Congressman Flores, a reasonable person would certainly understand that we can't afford to have a federal overlay.
Okay. And Mr. Helms?
Congressman Flores, I certainly would agree with the earlier commenters that there's no need for the federal overlay, and in fact, we can't afford it.
Okay. And Senator Olson?
Congressman Flores, there is no need to it. And I think one of the other things that people need to keep in mind here, this is a BLM rule. It most likely will not affect anything east of the Mississippi River, and I doubt that there's much BLM land in California as well.
Okay, well, I might turn that around on you and say that if the BLM starts on public land, they may decide to go elsewhere, and that's what, I mean,
Exactly.
bureaucrats have this propensity to expand their scope of operations, not reduce them. Thank you, I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Mullen.